Fears grow of a war between India and Pakistan. Both conducted airstrikes against each other. It follows more violence in the disputed region of Kashmir, fought over for decades. So can even more bloodshed be avoided? Can the Kashmir conflict ever be resolved? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Laura Kyle. India and Pakistan have laid claim to the Himalayan region of Kashmir for more than 70 years. It's one of the world's longest-running disputes, and events escalated in the past 2 weeks after a suicide bombing killed 41 Indian soldiers in Indian-administered Kashmir. On Tuesday, India launched airstrikes in Pakistani territory, saying it was targeting the armed group behind the attack. A day later, at least 6 people died during heavy shelling across the disputed region's line of control. Then Pakistan announced it shot down 2 Indian fighter jets in its airspace. But India said only one of its planes crashed and that its forces took down a Pakistani warplane.
The Pakistan Air Force was detected and the Indian Air Force responded instantly. In that aerial engagement, one Pakistan Air Force fighter aircraft was shot down by a MiG-21 Bison of the Indian Air Force. The Pakistani aircraft was seen by ground forces falling from the sky on the Pakistan side. In this engagement, we have unfortunately lost one MiG-21. The pilot is missing in action. Pakistan has claimed that he is in their custody.
Well, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan is calling for talks with India to de-escalate the crisis.
We decided to take action today. We only wanted to show India that we're able to. And if you come into our land, we will always retaliate. 2 Indian jets had crossed the border and they were shot down. I will say the pilots are with us. The problem is, where do we go from here? This is a very important issue. I'm addressing India. It is very important that we use wisdom here.
Well, let's take a quick look at the history of this long conflict. Kashmir came under dispute after the partition of India and Pakistan in 1947. The Hindu leader of the mostly Muslim region chose to join India on condition that a referendum would be held. It never was. In the first Kashmir war, India and Pakistan fought for more than a year. The UN imposed a ceasefire line and called on Pakistan to withdraw. There was a second war in 1965, and 7 years later, the 2 countries signed an agreement for the line of control, dividing Kashmir in 2, one part under Indian administration, the other Pakistani. There's been ongoing violence since then, and it's estimated 47,000 lives have been lost. OK, well, let's bring in our panel now. In Islamabad, Moeed Pirzada, a political commentator in Pakistan and geostrategic analyst. In New Delhi, via Skype, Sanjay Kak, editor of Witness Kashmir 1986 to 2016 and a specialist on the Kashmir conflict. And in London, Adnan Nasimullah, a senior lecturer in international relations at the Department of War Studies at King's College London. A very warm welcome to all of you. Adnan, if I can start with you, because an awful lot has happened on Wednesday. We've got jets downed, lives lost, plenty of competing narratives. What's the situation as you see it?
Well, right now, I think that in some senses, the sort of mutual retaliation of airstrikes is actually getting us, hopefully, to a situation in which we can start de-escalating. India has achieved its objectives in terms of hitting the supposed Jaish-e-Mohammed camps inside of Pakistan, but then Pakistan feels, and especially since its own challenges in terms of its airspace following the capture of Osama bin Laden in 2011, feels like it needed to respond to this abrogation of its own airspace. And now it has done so and actually could be seen as having sort of two Indian two Indian pilots. Hopefully, from now, we have a situation in which India and Pakistan have both achieved their primary objectives and now have a space for potentially de-escalating the conflict.
OK. Moeed, would you agree with that? Because these airstrikes, I mean, they're almost unprecedented, aren't they, in this very long-running conflict? It was a very rapid escalation. But have we now reached the point of brinkmanship where both sides are saying, right, OK, we've laid our cards on the table, now we're ready to back down?
I just heard the gentleman from New Delhi, and I agree with him. Even in Islamabad and all across Pakistan, there is no appetite or desire for escalation. In fact, Pakistanis are very surprised by the Indian intervention and the attack on the so-called surgical strike, because Pakistani sees no reason for this kind of, the Indian attack. The understanding in Islamabad, a very clear consensus understanding in Islamabad is that whatever the Narendra Modi government is doing, it is to do with the Indian elections that are due in April, in which the Narendra Modi wanted to win over the sympathies or the vote bank of the Hindi belt and north of India. And he is picking up a tussle, a confrontation and tension with Pakistan that will help in the elections. And unfortunately, Narendra Modi has a history from 2002 onwards, when he first became the chief minister of the Indian state of Gujarat. He has been picking up one or other kind of extremist theme.
Okay.
And right now,
I'm just going to jump in there, Moeed, because certainly I'm sure that, and we'll bring this up with our Indian guest, that Indian politics does play a part in this. But I just want to pick you up on that point that you made earlier, that there was no reason for India's attack on the training camp of Jaish-e-Mohammed. I mean, of course, India would say there was every reason because it blames Jaish-e-Mohammed for the biggest attack in Indian-administered Kashmir that it had seen in years, where more than 40 Indian paramilitary soldiers were killed.
You know, look, the India accused Pakistan without first investigating the whole thing. The attack took place on the Srinagar-Jammu road, which is deep inside the Indian-administered and occupied Jammu and Kashmir. India claimed that 350 kilograms of RDX was used in the attack. India also said that the attack was carried out by a young 19-year-old Srinagar boy by the name of Adil. And the fact that he was basically a citizen over there. So then India said that a video has been posted by Jaish-e-Mohammed. It needed to investigate where the video was posted, who posted the video. And immediately what Indian media does not tell the world is that the moment this video turned up, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, whatever it was in Pakistan, started denying. They said, we have nothing to do with it. We have no knowledge of it. But this is what the Indian media does not tell the Indian public.
Right,
so then India goes
but let's just stick to what Pakistan can do in this instance, because what investigation did Pakistan launch into this group and into these training camps, which are clearly very easy to access?
Pakistan is continuously asking India to provide any form of intelligence, any form of actionable evidence, and it's very clear, not only once, but twice.
Why can't Pakistan find its own intelligence and evidence?
What would Pakistan investigate into unless India basically provides any evidence that connects with any Pakistani group or citizen with what happened in Pulwama? How would Pakistan investigate that? I mean, that's very strange. India has to provide some evidence. Even now, Pakistan is asking them. Even today, India has to provide some evidence. Pakistan will act on that.
Sanjay, let's bring you in at this point. On the one hand, we've got Pakistan saying it doesn't want to escalate this crisis or go to war. It's offering essentially an olive branch, isn't it, to India for talks. But on the other hand, it's saying that this group was not responsible and India had no right to launch a strike on its territories. So where is India sitting at the moment? What's its response likely to be?
If I may, I think this binary between India and Pakistan, it's as if the fight was happening over some kind of invisible territory which didn't have a history and a story of its own. So I think that the apparently irreconcilable differences between India and Pakistan, somewhere in all this noise and bluster and the brinkmanship, there is never enough space given in this flurry of charges and countercharges about what the issue finally is about, and the issue is about Kashmir. And I think that fundamentally to reduce what is happening in Kashmir, and that is the fundamental problem. if there was not a deep political problem within Kashmir, what is happening today would not be happening. So India and Pakistan are both engaging in a kind of shadow war over an area to which the conversation never turns. And I think every time we talk about 40 soldiers being killed or an aircraft being downed, we should also ask, what is the soil on which it's happening? This is not Pakistan. This is not India's alone. It is a region called Kashmir, and that is never given adequate space.
Absolutely. Adnan, on that point, I mean, let's turn to history a little bit just to get a deeper understanding of this region that we're talking about. The UN ceasefire, it demanded many decades ago a referendum to determine what Kashmiris actually wanted, and that never happened. Why not?
Well, I mean, the Indian position is that the referendum could only have occurred after Pakistan had disarmed and withdrew. Pakistan's point of view is that the referendum never occurred, and so therefore Indian control over Kashmir is illegitimate. I mean, I completely agree that the real victims of this kind of brinkmanship and this competition are in fact the people of Kashmir, who are, most of them, especially in the Kashmir Valley, under the administration and under the governance of the Indian government. And then over time, the Indian government has put forward larger strategic concerns rather than over the interests of the Kashmiri people at various points. But at the same time, Pakistan, it doesn't put the Kashmiri people first either, but rather uses Kashmir as a kind of a bargaining chip in a sort of broader competition between India and Pakistan that goes back to a very early moment in Indo-Pakistani relationships in which Pakistan felt like its that it felt an existential threat to its own existence.
Moeed,
I don't think that in...
Would you that's fine. Let's see if Moeed agrees with that Pakistan uses Kashmir for all of India's faults. Pakistan is also partly to blame because it uses this region as a bargaining chip.
That could be true. That's an academic discussion. But it's important for our viewers to understand that what's happening in Kashmir since 2014, which has created this new form of popular militancy, has to do with the Narendra Modi government trying to change the special status of the state of Jammu and Kashmir.
I'm going to just jump in there. You can't just dismiss Pakistan's role as an academic discussion. It needs to take responsibility as well for its actions. We're talking to India. We've got Sanjay to give the Indian point of view. We need to get the Pakistani point of view from you. Should Pakistan be doing more?
Yeah. Pakistan is not Pakistan has no intentions to go on a war on Kashmir. The situation, what we're experiencing right now, is not necessarily related to Kashmir. India has serious political problem since 2013, ever since the BJP government came into power in New Delhi, and they wanted to change the special status of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, which was guaranteed to them under the Constitution of India, which is Article 370, and then Article 35A of the Indian Constitution. This is what the trouble against which the youth in Kashmir is reacting. What we are seeing right now is a totally different thing. There is an election in India in April, and Indian government is using this whole violence is trying to shape a narrative for winning the elections. This is how we see it. If you happen to be in Pakistan, this is how we see it. This is Indian election. Pakistan has become a domestic issue in the Indian politics. It's not about Kashmir. They tell it's about Kashmir. It's not about Kashmir.
Okay, I think Sanjay would probably agree with you there. Sanjay, is that true that you would concede that point that Modi is totally using the Kashmir issue to play into this election that's coming up very soon?
I would absolutely agree. I think that right now, the fact that the killing of 40 soldiers in the suicide attack has come at what is, unfortunately, a very propitiate moment for the Narendra Modi government, because they are looking to an election not too far away in which they're increasingly finding the incredible support that they came into government in 2014 with slipping away very fast. And they definitely needed something like this to galvanize support. So if it's a coincidence, it's an incredibly useful coincidence for them that this thing has happened. And of course, they have milked it for all its semiotic and symbolic value. There's no doubt about that. But having said that, I think that to just simply think that it's only the Narendra Modi government which is caused such this kind of, the upsurge in the level of pressure that the Kashmiri people are feeling, that's not true. There's a very long history, which is at least 30 years old, if not 70 years old. So I think there's a great deal of disingenuousness, even on the part of the Pakistani position, where they see that they play the game as well. The brinkmanship and the political posturing, including, I would like to say, including Imran Khan's very statesman-like statements. These are all part of posturing that leaderships in both countries do in order to reach out to their own political constituencies. And I can only come back to the fact that everybody seems to ignore the fact that the 20-year-old who blew up those 40 soldiers was a young Kashmiri, that when the aircraft falls on the soil on Kashmiri soil, it's Kashmiri civilians who also die along with the soldiers who die, that when India launches a cross-border raid, these are Kashmiris, even if they are across the line of control, it's Kashmiris who are dying. So I cannot overstate the importance that if we are ever going to understand what the issue and how are we going to resolve it, which is how you began this program with, well, I would like to tell the world and to whoever's listening that they've got to stop thinking of it as just an India and Pakistan issue, because unless you get beyond to the third player in this game, and that's the Kashmiri people on both sides of the border, I'll say this, I don't think we are going to make a step ahead.
Sanjay, what do Kashmiris want? Do they want independence?
I think that this is a kind of a simple question which needs a complicated answer. Yes, some do. Many also want a merger with Pakistan. That cannot be denied. And many of them would like some kind of an autonomous relationship with India, and some might actually want to be a part of India. But the simple the issue is that how will you ever ascertain what Kashmiris want so long as the situation is as hideously abnormal as it is right now? The fact that this was a convoy of 2,500 soldiers which was attacked, that's an ordinary day, in Kashmir, where you have upward of 500,000 soldiers. So in a situation of such grotesque militarization, how will we ever be able to ask that question fairly? What do Kashmiris want? How will any kind of election, whether it's to the national parliament, whether it's to the state assembly, whether it's to a municipality, whatever level, how can we ever think that these are genuine barometers of public opinion? So I would say if you were to demilitarize Kashmir for a period of 5 or 10 years, then you would know what Kashmiris want. Do they want independence? Do they want to go to Pakistan? Do they want a kind of relationship with India? Do they want to be a part of India? We will not know the answers to these questions until the situation of abnormality continues. And that is what requires a global intervention.
Adnan, I was going to get onto that. What would it take for the world's most militarized zone, this region, this Kashmir region, to become demilitarized, or at least for India, certainly, to draw back its presence of troops in the Kashmir Valley region?
I think it's a very good question. I don't know if there's an answer. Unfortunately, I think that the problem is that it's very hard to unscramble eggs. And the ratcheting up of militarization leads to a lot of discontent, which is then exploited, which then leads to greater attacks, which then leads to greater militarization. And I think that one of the things that has really driven this in both India and Pakistan is the sheer intensity of electoral competition, in which Kashmir is not actually represented. The Pakistan-administered Jammu and Kashmir is not actually represented in the Pakistan National Assembly, which is unfortunate. And in India, most of the votes for the BJP, but also for Congress and other opposition parties, don't come from Kashmir at all. So in part, I think that the notion of the sort of national politics and the sort of saber rattling and waving the flag around elections, which in India happen quite frequently, and in Pakistan more regularly, is increasingly sidelining ordinary Kashmiris and make it more rather than less likely that there will just be increasing militarization and indeed increasing spending on defense on India and in Pakistan, investments in air forces, investments in strategic capabilities. So it's the right question to ask. I don't know whether there is a political way forward.
Right. And Moeed, we know that the situation in India, as far as Kashmir is concerned, is far from ideal. But I'm interested to know what the conversation is in Pakistan and how much determination is given to what Kashmiris themselves want. And if it is independence, would that ever be granted?
Look, Pakistani, there are different kind of positions within Pakistan. I mean, the Pakistani government obviously has a very traditional position. The think tank community has a different position. I just heard the gentleman from New Delhi, and I think he's dot on. He is very rational when he says that it is absolutely essential to de-escalate the situation in Kashmir. There are almost like 700,000 armed soldiers in Kashmir. This is in addition to the Central Reserve Police and Srinagar Kashmir Police and all that. There is a dire need for demilitarization in Kashmir. No one in Pakistan in rational mind frame thinks that Kashmir issue can be resolved very quickly or Kashmir can become Pakistan. Also, it is now understood that any region that has seen so much convulsion and so much violence and so much struggle against any kind of authority, let it be Indian authority in this case, has developed an identity, a new identity of its own. So what is required is, and also the India's previous governments of Congress and the coalition governments were far more wise in dealing with the situation in Kashmir. So the kind of situation that is now extreme tyranny position, which is in Kashmir since 2014, was not prevalent before. Before the Indian government would always come up with some sort of conciliatory package, some sort of negotiation, some sort of engagement in Kashmir. So what the Moeed government has done, it hasn't really engaged the Kashmiri youth or the Kashmiri leadership, and it has taken a very hard stand, which is even unpopular in India. So this time to de-escalate in Kashmir, India has to take steps. Pakistan cannot take those steps at the moment.
Okay. And Sanjay, you brought up before the need for international intervention here or international help efforts. What needs to happen on the international stage to try to resolve this conflict that's been going on for more than 70 years?
Well, for the first thing I think would be to just increase the level of scrutiny. I think that Kashmiris have been doing a remarkable job of telling their own stories, documenting what's been going on, trying to understand, trying to make a way forward. But that kind of a conversation needs an audience. I think that it's not as if when I talk about international scrutiny, we know how politicized that is. That whether it's U.S. interest or the European interest, it's always guided by their own self-interest.
Okay.
So American attention, for example, will rise a great deal when they're trying to pressurize India, when they're trying to concede space. The coverage will disappear. But we have seen some remarkable steps in recent times. I mean, the UN, for example, last year came out with quite a scathing report on the situation in Kashmir. And even though the current political regime in New Delhi may seem to be unperturbed by what the world thinks of what is going on in Kashmir, we do know that in the end, it is public opinion that matters, whether it's domestic public opinion, whether it's international public opinion. So I'm not exactly talking about, white helmets or blue helmets landing up at Srinagar airport, not at all. I'm not sure that they have ever solved any problem anywhere in the world, and they are unlikely to do so in India. But I
Okay.
think just as an international audience, we have to pay attention to what's going on.
Thank you
That's what I
very
would
much indeed. We have run out of time for our discussion today. It's been a really good one. Thank you for joining us, Moeed, Pirzada, Sanjay Kak and Adnan Nasimullah. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, that's aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, do go to our Facebook page, that's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Laura Kyle, and the whole team here, it's bye for now.